Hello, everyone.
Hello, Internet.
Welcome.
I am eating Doritos.
I want some.
Doritos. Which ones?
Nacho cheese.
Spicy.
Okay. Those are fine. Better than the original. Not as good as the Cool Ranch.
Oh, man. See, I think Cool Ranch are overrated.
Not a big fan of the Cool Ranch.
Goodness gracious.
But again, I was never a big fan of the Doritos either. So
Yeah, you think they smell like feet, right?
they do. They do smell like feet.
What are
I
the
don't smell
purple? What
feet very
are
often.
the newest kind of purplish ones? Those ones are pretty good. They're spicy too, but they're like something.
Chili,
Not-
something sweet chili?
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
I
good.
haven't had those.
They're good.
You want to hear the most annoying sound in the world? I'm serious. This thing is, it is the, when
Do you remember that?
When it comes out of nowhere, you're just like, you want to kill somebody when you hear this.
Do you remember that Vine of the dude who squeezed like 400 of those in a bin in
Yes.
like a Walmart?
Yes.
Just like
Oh
a
my
harmony
God.
of 4,000 of those things.
I wonder what I would even. What is that called, John? Like a rubber chicken?
It's just a rubber chicken. He's wearing a tux. This is kind of the outfit Stibbs would wear if he was doing.
I drank
Stibbs
beer
movie
with my
classics.
friends. Sometimes I had too many beers. I like beer. I still like beer. I had beers, have some beers. One beer, drink beer, drinks beer, drank beer, and drinking beer.
Upstairs, downstairs, where was it? I don't know, but I had one beer.
We probably have beer center each week. Ralph Club, biggest contributor. Beer for that. I like beer. I don't know if you like beer center or not. What do you like to drink? Next
I had one beer Friday.
hanging out and having some beers with friends, which I gladly do, and which I fully embrace.
Well, you think it was nope? There was one beer Friday.
When you said what you said
Kill this music because One Beer Friday is on the air. Yes, it is. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to One Beer Friday, and this is where we sit and drink together.
Sorry, it was
It's
on
off.
autoplay. It played again.
Yeah, I made the mistake. It's within arm's reach. When we went up live on the Stibbs TV, you can watch us on Stibbs TV if you dare. YouTube.com. We've tweeted out the links. You know the drill by now.
You've heard of
There's
the
this-
YouTube.
There's this rubber chicken that is like sitting here next to me. My boys like to use it to prank each other and annoy each other, and I brought it on, and now Stibbs has found the audio of what was that like? How many different?
It was an old Vine, if you remember Vine, that someone had, and it's
R.I.P.
It's like a bin of like a whole bunch of those things, like hundreds of them at like a Walmart or Costco or whatever. And so this dude squeezes one and it sounds goofy. And then he just takes his hand and pushes down on like 50 of them. That's the result.
Oh, you know what it sounds like? It sounds like one of those European soccer matches.
Yeah.
Without the vuvuzelas. I mean, it really does. I'm just going basic today. I got some lawn mowing beer, so I'm going with the Bud Light that Stibbs approves of because it's not Chiefs version. If you missed it earlier, Stibbs got a gift from a friend of the program, a case of Bud Light 16-ounce aluminum bottles, the official Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl champion edition. I don't know if you know this, but the Chiefs won the Super Bowl.
I don't know
4
what
months
you're
ago.
talking about. This is what I received from my friend of the program.
Well, that's like some of the plainest label beer I've ever seen in my life, Stibbs.
Yeah. Go Broncos.
Yep, there it is, the official Go Broncos Bud Light. And Josh, you have some. You're going frou-frou on us today.
Yeah, I'm going with the Sun Reaper from Toppling Goliath. I'm rocking one of their hats today too. My second favorite brewery in the world behind our friends Cross Train here. Well, behind every brewery in Omaha and Lincoln.
Let's see that
and
can
Nebraska.
again. We'll get the close up for the folks. The Sun Reaper. That looks like the woman from the movie that Stibbs recommended.
It's the one who got her ass kicked.
Really?
Yeah, exactly.
It's almost as cool as my can.
Yeah, let's see. Look at that. The official Go Broncos beer of and the smiley face. It's very nice.
I
Cool
didn't,
label.
I didn't start it in the right spot. It was that old John Mulaney writing on poster board bit where you start with a giant G and then you run out of space on the other end. I didn't time it out very well.
Well, if you'd like to join us, tweet at us at #OneBeerFriday. Show us what you're drinking. We've already had a lot of people start that process on the JTech Construction Zone Twitter feed, and we always like to see what you're drinking. And again, join us on YouTube.com, our Stibbs TV link, and you can watch us enjoy beers with all of you on this Friday. We were supposed to be joined today by Mike Farron, but unfortunately, Mike's dog passed away. And so he will join us at another time. So we'll pour one out for Mike's late dog, and we're sad to hear about that. But Mike will join us in a future virtual One Beer Friday. So if you would like to join us in a future virtual One Beer Friday, send us an email into the Equitable Bank inbox, John at 1620thezone.com, Josh at 1620thezone.com, or Stibbs at 1620thezone.com. And you can join us in the video stream and have a fun one beer conversation with us.
I like the username of the first person that commented on Stibbs TV today. At least a share. Longtime listener, first time stream commenter. What's up, fellas? Cheers to the weekend with a nice beer emoji. Yeah.
Yep.
At least a
At
share.
least
What
a
is
share.
that? Jack Mitchell's alt account on YouTube?
Probably something like that.
How many? If he had 6 Twitter accounts, how many YouTube accounts does
Oh,
he?
geez, too many, Stibbs. That's a great question.
I'm sure he's got a lot. So, usually this segment, we just have a conversation that we might have sitting around the bar, drinking beers. And last night was the replay of the 94 and 95 Orange Bowls, the loss to Florida State in the last second, and the win over Miami. And I saw this conversation earlier today on Twitter. I'll give Dirk Chatlin the credit for this. But he asked the question, the best pure football game involving Nebraska start to finish, objectively. So not the best necessarily Nebraska football game. We tend to think of, when we think of best, we think of games that our teams won. But this is just the best game, start to finish, that involved Nebraska. So it could include losses. And
I have a question.
The 4
for you.
choices.
Oh, he had. Okay, yeah, keep going.
The 4 choices he put on there was the game of the century, 1971, the Miami Orange Bowl in 1984,
Yep.
the Miami Orange Bowl from 1995,
Okay.
and the Missouri game from 1997. The best pure football game involving Nebraska, start to finish.
How much does defense matter to you in this question? Because as you will notice, the scores of those are 35-31, 31-30, 24-17, and 45-38. So it's high scoring, low scoring. How much does defense matter to you in this conversation? Because when I hear best pure football, I wonder about that side of the ball, and if a high scoring game maybe doesn't allow itself to be a best pure game, if that makes sense. Because it doesn't bother me. I don't know, but in this discussion.
Honestly, I mean, it's like it's like judging a great meal or something. I mean, sometimes the best meal doesn't always have to look the best, right? It just tastes the best. It satisfies the best. To me, it doesn't matter if it's high scoring or low scoring. I would avoid extremes. I would avoid
like the 7-3 Nebraska Oklahoma game from 89 or whatever that was.
Yeah, that certainly is an extreme. You could say the Nebraska Oklahoma State game again. Barry Sanders versus Ken Clark, 63-42.
That's the other extreme. Yeah,
that's the other extreme. Now that said, I enjoyed both of those games.
Sure,
for what they were. I guess when I think of best football games, it's simply how much were you entertained. And yeah, for a lot of people, you're probably entertained more by up and down scoring than you are a defensive dogfight. But like, for example, last night's game, the 95 Orange Bowl, I thought had a great balance of good offense and good defense, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Miami had some big plays. Nebraska didn't have as many big plays, but they had
their drives were just grinders.
Their drives were, the funny thing, and it was something I'd forgotten about that game, was all of Nebraska's scoring drives were short drives. They had the short field. The longer drives that they had ended in turnovers.
Yeah.
Some of them, at least two of them did. I think two of their longest drives ended in turnovers. So Nebraska didn't have they didn't have the signature, Johnny Rodgers punt return type play or Mike Rozier's run type play. But there was a good balance, right, between good offense and good defense. Nebraska being strongest team at the end. Miami, striking for big plays. Obviously defensively, Nebraska blowing up Frank Costa play after play after play after play. So I thought that game had a nice balance. To me, the answer, and
I know
a lot of this is biased. To me, the answer is when you say objectively the best football game involving Nebraska, in my opinion, the answer is and ever shall be the game of the century.
Yeah, see, the thing that sucks for me with this is I've watched bits and pieces. I don't think I've ever sat down and watched that whole game. And, maybe we should. I mean, we have all this technology. Maybe we should do that sometime and just live kind of watch it together. I would love to do that because I'd love to watch that whole game. But if you're talking pure back and forth, that game, I mean, it's certainly, I think of the four that Dirk gave us as options. Sorry, 1995 Orange Bowl. In my opinion, you are last of those four games. This one, though, when you take into account everything going into it, the Sports Illustrated cover, 1 versus 2, Nebraska on this long winning streak, their old rivals Oklahoma, the plays, the moments, and the back and forth nature. There were scores in every single quarter. The only quarter without a touchdown by one of the teams was Oklahoma not getting 7 in the first quarter, but they got a field goal. Otherwise, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And that's the thing that game has that, I think the 84 Orange Bowl is tremendous. That game is so fun. And I think when you add in the underdog component, in the eyes of some, it might get it actually knocked up a little bit higher, and that it was technically that it was for the national title. In the end, we knew that. We thought that Nebraska Oklahoma would be for the national title, and in the end, it was. But it's not a national championship game, and so that's where the '84 Orange Bowl has an extra bit of sauce to it. But the thing about that game is, as fun and as entertaining as it is, Nebraska, it's not really back and forth. It's Miami scores a couple times, then Nebraska gets back into it. Miami scores a couple times, and then Nebraska gets within 1, and then they go for 2. That's the one negative about the 84 Orange Bowl, if you're going to try to knock it, that it just never really has the true trading scores kind of every other drive component. I in my lifetime, the Missouri game, I think, is the best, most fun game Nebraska has been involved in. It's hard to say it's the best in this discussion when you have a national title and the game of the century. So I'd feel wrong in a way putting it at number 1, but that game has everything. It has overtime, which was new at the time. It was 2 or 3 years old.
That was the first year of overtime. I think.
Okay, yeah. So you have overtime, which is awesome. You have true back and forth. You have the underdog component. And I mean, if you want to go through the memorable plays from those 3 games, I wouldn't make the argument myself, but you could make the argument that game has the most famous play versus the game of the century or versus the 84 Orange Bowl. I don't know if I would totally agree with that because Johnny Rodgers' punt return and the 2-point conversion are extremely memorable. But Matt Davison's catch is one of the most famous plays in the history of Nebraska football. It's in the top 3, maybe. And so that would knock it up. But I think you're right. I think it has to be the game of the century. I want to watch that game. You know, we have all the time in the world. Maybe I will sometime soon. But I would love to see it. The only thing that sucks, of course, is it's just so old. And this is just me, but it seems like the players are moving slower because of like the way that it was shot on camera, if that makes sense.
Well, and that's probably one of the knocks. And obviously, the longer we go, the harder it's going to be to say to look at it aesthetically in the same way. But I'm sorry, Michael, I'm calling you out. But I argued with him because he thinks it's the 84 Orange Bowl. And I've got my issues with the 84 Orange Bowl that has nothing to do with the end result. We'll get to that in a minute. But to say that, you know, well, football looks so different back then. That game was only separated by 12 years and 5 weeks from the 84 Orange Bowl. So to say that it looks that much different from the 84 Orange Bowl would be to me like saying, well, go back and look at a Joe Gans game. Man, football looks so much different. So I don't want to hear that argument. It's a horrible, horrible argument. Here's my problem with the 84 Orange Bowl. The two things that make that quote unquote great, and I'm not arguing that it wasn't great, that it wasn't an important game, that it doesn't deserve its place in the pantheon of this conversation. But here's the reason why it cannot be and is not even close to the game of the century.
Oh, wow.
Not even close. No lead changes, as you mentioned. Miami got out to a 2-score lead in the first half, and then again in the second half. There were 0 lead changes.
It's tough. Real quick, it's tough to say like a game is the best of all time if it has no lead changes.
Now you can you could throw it back in my face. Hey, wasn't Game 7 of the World Series in 2016? There were no lead changes there either, and that's true. The Indians never led.
Oh yeah.
So you can have a great game without a lead change, but the game of the century, as you pointed out, had multiple lead changes, and Oklahoma twice came back from 2 scores down. The only two things that keep that make the 84 Orange Bowl quote unquote great is the upset component of Miami being a double-digit underdog and Tom Osborne's decision to go for 2. You take out any of those two things, and that game is just another ordinary football game.
I don't know.
Now,
I mean,
those
it's a national title, though. It's not ordinary. I just don't want to say it's not ordinary. It's still a really good football game. But you're right about the 2-point conversion. Let's pretend
you just take out the 2-point conversion, and that game loses all of its steam. Because that ended up being the defining moment of that game. There are people out there that can't remember specific moments from that game other than, oh, that's the game that Tom Osborne went for 2.
You know what's funny is I can remember 4 moments from that game, and none of them involved Miami directly. The 2-point conversion, the Jeff Smith touchdown at the very end, the Irving Fryer drop, and the fumble Rooski. I don't remember anything that Miami did, though, positive outside of deflecting the final pass from that game, whereas you can think about those certainly in the other games that we're talking about.
But I've always had this, and I know I'm biased. I was there. I hated Miami. I hate Miami to this day. Howard Schnellenberger is a pile of dog crap. Can't stand him. But in all seriousness, if I am to take away all those trappings, the only thing that separates that from the Jets beating the Colts was the 2-point conversion, right? Let's say that game ends with Jeff Smith being stopped on 4th and 8. Is that game remembered as fondly as it is today?
No, and that's a great argument against it. Without look, there are games that are remembered for their final plays.
Sure.
So I don't want to take the final play away, but I've never thought about that. If they don't pick that up, it's just an upset. It's a great upset. It's one of the all-time upsets because of how good Nebraska was. But that game itself, do we view it the way we do? No. The 2-point conversion makes that game. It does. Just like we've argued for years it makes Osborne's legacy, it also makes the game itself.
And so when I argue the game of the century against that, consider this about the game of the century. There was 1 turnover the entire game. There was 1 accepted penalty the entire game. And you could make and the other thing about the 84 Orange Bowl, The reason that game was made possible was because Nebraska played a C- game that day.
Yeah.
The only reason Miami was close in that game is because Nebraska played a C- game that day. Sorry, Miami. Yes, I'm taking some credit away from you, but you were not the better team. If you play that game 10 times, Nebraska's winning at least 8, probably 9. You got them on the one day you couldn't. All right? But the game of the century, you had two teams that were playing at an extremely high level. And while there were a lot of points scored, and you could say, well, defensively wasn't that great, Rich Glover had a monster day. The reason why Oklahoma scored was because Nebraska forced them to do that which they didn't think they could do, and that's throw the ball. Jack Mildren throwing to John Harrison was their offense that day, and Mildren running the ball. But the game of the century was supposed to be Greg Pruitt versus Johnny Rodgers. And Greg Pruitt was a non-factor because Nebraska took him out. So Oklahoma had to find other ways, and they did, to their credit. Nebraska, on the other hand, they basically had to say, here's Jeff Kinney, stop him. They couldn't stop him. You could make the argument that in the game of the century, both teams were both playing at a very high level.
Yeah.
But the only reason the 84 Orange Bowl is allowed to be so great is because one of the two teams obviously was not on its A game that night.
And that's a solid argument. Now, it's interesting because that is also an argument against the Missouri game because Nebraska definitely was not at its best in that game, and that's why. And Missouri played out of their minds. Missouri was so good. Where do you come down on that game? Because
it was a good game, and it's true. I mean, in order for a big upset to happen, obviously the team that's favored has to have an off day of sorts. But you can make the argument that when the chips were down, Nebraska rose to the occasion. When they had the ball late and Frost had to get him down the field in position for the tying touchdown, they were on their game. In overtime, they dominated. In overtime, they scored in, what was it, like 3 plays? And then on defense, they didn't allow Missouri a first down.
It was a 4 and out. Yeah.
So you could make the argument that at least, at the right times, Nebraska became the Nebraska we expected. But for the most of the 84 Orange Bowl, Nebraska was playing off all night long. But that certainly was a good game because it did have the back and forth element to it. It was exciting. It had a signature play, and it certainly was an exciting finish. But yeah, I just, and I understand my own biases are at play here, but I have always wondered this about the 84 Orange Bowl. Was it really that great a game? It was a momentous game. It was an important game. It signified, something, big happened. But as a game itself, was it really that good?
I mean, even without the lead changes, it is a good game, and it is an appealing game to watch. It's not a ridiculously high-scoring game, but it is high-scoring enough. The 2-point conversion definitely puts it over the top. Without that play, it is an upset, definitely, and it is a championship game that we remember, but it's not an all-timer. That championship game is considered up there with the USC-Texas game, with the one of the Alabama-Clemson games. Like, it's up there. Sometimes it's still the first game listed. So I get it. I think you're a little too harsh on it, but I think that we've presented the argument as to why it's not the best game or most entertaining, or whatever the way Dirk put it. It's not that. It's not. It is really, really good. I was surprised, dude. I just looked at the poll question. The 95 Orange Bowl won the poll, which blows my mind. That's a good game. It's good. I don't want to say
it's good. It's good.
It's nowhere near as, in my opinion, at least, as good as the others. It's not as exciting. It's stressful. I think it's more stressful than the others are, if that makes any sense, even though one of them was, 1 versus 2. But I don't know. The Miami-Nebraska game always, like, Nebraska was down by 2 scores for almost all the game, and then suddenly they weren't. And great comeback, but I don't think that made that game like super. It was 17-7 going into the fourth quarter, or right before the fourth quarter.
Here is Lou. Hi, Lou. Thanks for waiting. Join us on a One Beer Friday.
Hey, Lou.
Yeah, talking about emotional, satisfying game is the 78 Oklahoma-Nebraska game. Nebraska had lost 5 in a row, and Osborne couldn't get that albatross off his neck, and it happened to be Barry Switzer coming in with a plate full of tacos, telling Nebraska they were going to go to that bowl after the game was over. And then they pulled it out with 4 fumbles on Oklahoma's side. So to me, that was a really satisfying game.
Lou, and you know, from a Nebraska fan's perspective, certainly, you know, that is good. Now, the question to respect the spirit of the question was the best pure football game involving Nebraska, regardless of the end result. You know, and that was another game that, you know, there's a lot of turnovers, a lot of hard hitting. It was certainly a fun game to watch. But again, kind of like the 84 Orange Bowl, Oklahoma had to have a bad game that day and turn the ball over 7 times in order for Nebraska to win that game. So, you know, and not that you can't have mistakes, because we're all human and mistakes are part of sports.
But you want a clean game when you're. I mean,
but
right now we're splitting hairs, so you have to split hairs.
But again, there was 1 turnover in the game of the century, and there was 1 penalty. And that was it.
Yeah, the 78 Oklahoma game is fun. It's good, but it is an ugly, ugly, ugly football game. It really is, and especially on the Oklahoma side of things. And so, in a way, it kind of feels like Nebraska got away with one with a victory in that game. Not to take anything away from it, but it's just an uglier football game. Whereas the ones that we're talking about are very aesthetically pleasing for the most part. You know, the Missouri-Nebraska game didn't have a whole lot of turnovers. And it was very back and forth. You just mentioned, I mean, 1 turnover and penalty each is ridiculous, you know, in a football game. To think about how clean and enjoyable that would be to watch as a football fan today. You would never imagine such a thing.
No,
so
never.
I think that it matters. You know, when you're getting down to the true best of the best, you have to split a lot of hairs. And in the case, the 71 game, you know, rises to the top.
One final point on this. Matt writes into the JTech Construction Zone Twitter feed. How about the Orange Bowl against Florida State? I would make the argument that game, from an aesthetically, just an objectively good watch, better than the 84 Orange Bowl.
Oh, no,
easily.
It's not bad. No way.
Easily.
Man, I think you're on an island with this one.
No, easily. Come on. Yeah, again, you had lead changes. You had the element of the upset, similar to the 84 Orange Bowl. You had controversy.
But does that make a game better? Or does that make a game more aesthetically
It certainly can. Absolutely it can. I think from just watching a pure football standpoint, you know, because part of watching an underdog against a heavy favorite is to watch the struggle. Nebraska struggled to stay with Florida State, and then they persevered and they stayed with them. I think Miami didn't appear to struggle to stay with Nebraska.
No,
they led the whole game.
I was going to say, they got up early.
They led the entire game because, again, Nebraska played horrifically. That I think just, again, those are 2 games Nebraska lost, narrowly, very close. I would say, sitting down and watching those 2 games, I would take the 94 Orange Bowl over the 84 Orange Bowl any day of the week. Any day of the week.
Man.
All right.
That's going to be good again.
All right. When we come back, we've got predictions.
Oh, baby.
And we've got what you say. And we'll say goodbye to everyone on Stibbs TV. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Stibbs TV.
But we'll stay right here on 1620.